Poor black girl gave her last $10 to a stranger not knowing he's an Arab millionaire. The train station was nearly deserted, shrouded in the gray mist of a cold March rain. Puddles gathered in the cracks of the platform, and the sky hung low, suffocating the city beneath a heavy, brooding cloud. Kendra pulled her coat tighter around her thin body, her fingers numb from the cold. She had barely enough time to check the schedule board before the faint sound of a train's arrival reached her ears. The interview she was headed to felt like a distant dream, her last flicker of hope. It was all she had left. Her eyes shifted nervously from the crumpled ticket in her hand to the misty platform. But then, a voice broke through the stillness. "Excuse me, miss." She jumped, startled. A man stood only a few feet away, drenched from the rain. His clothes were soaked, and his brown eyes, tired, almost apologetic, met hers. His beard was wild, his hair stuck to his forehead, and his coat looked too thin for the cold. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice shaky. "I had my wallet stolen. I need $10 to get home. I swear I'll pay you back. If you can trust me, please." Kendra hesitated, looking him over. His hands were red from the cold, his lips trembling. But it wasn't just his appearance, it was something in his eyes. There was no threat, no manipulation, just exhaustion, and maybe even a touch of shame. "Do you have anyone you can call?" she asked, trying to keep her guard up. The man shook his head. "My phone's dead. I tried asking others, but no one would help." Kendra's fingers clenched around the crumpled bill in her pocket. This was her last $10, the last of what she had after buying her train ticket and a cheap cup of coffee. It was all she had. The meal she had planned after her interview, gone in an instant. "How'd I know you're not lying?" she pressed, her voice wary. He sighed. "You don't, but I swear I just need to get home." Kendra could feel the old version of herself, the one who believed in kindness without expecting anything in return, flicker inside her. "Help him," that inner voice whispered. Without a word, she reached into her pocket and pulled out the crumpled bill. Her heart pounded in her chest as her hand hovered in the air for a long moment. This was crazy, irrational, but, she told herself, maybe it mattered. "I don't know why," she said, her voice barely audible, "but I believe you." The man stared at the bill in her hand as if it were a lifeline, then reached out to take it gently, almost reverently. "I promise I'll pay you back," he said, his voice cracking. "Just get home safe," Kendra said, managing a weak smile. He opened his mouth as if to say more, but just then, the train pulled in with a hiss, and the moment vanished. The man nodded quickly, turned, and disappeared into the crowd, boarding the train within seconds. Kendra stood there, numb, her stomach twisted with uncertainty. She had just given away the last of her money. As the train doors slammed shut, Kendra climbed aboard her own train, her thoughts a swirl of doubt and anxiety. She didn't know it yet, but that one small act of kindness, giving away her last $10, would be the moment that changed her life forever. The next morning, Kendra stood outside the office building where her interview was supposed to take place, her heart pounding in her chest. Her stomach rumbled, empty from missing breakfast, something she hadn't planned, but with no money, there was no choice. She had to skip it. She was late. The bus had required exact change, but she didn't have any. She'd tried walking to the office, but the city was sprawling and indifferent, the streets unfamiliar, and by the time she arrived, 20 minutes late, the receptionist's smile was tight, almost apologetic. "I'm sorry, the interviewer is tied up with another meeting," she said. "You'll have to reschedule." Kendra tried to explain, even offered to wait, but the receptionist had already turned back to her computer, dismissing her without a second glance. With no job, no money, and nowhere to go, Kendra walked out of the building. Her shoulders sagged, and her socks squelched in her soaked shoes. She stood there for a moment on the sidewalk, the wind biting through her coat, watching the people hurry by, warm, dry, and busy with their lives. It felt like the world was moving forward without her. By the time she made it back to her tiny rented room, where the landlord was waiting outside her door, she had nothing but the clothes on her back and the faint echoes of her mother's voice in her head. "Emily, I know rent's due. I can't keep making exceptions." Kendra didn't argue. What was the point? She packed the few things she had, 2 changes of clothes, a broken phone, a paperback her mother used to read to her, and left. That night, she found a corner in the 24-hour library downtown. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, the air smelled like stale coffee and dust, and the security guard shot her a weary look as she curled up in a chair. The next night, she was asked to leave. The benches in the park weren't much better, metal, cold, unforgiving. But the stars above were quiet, and the city, in its strange way, fell silent after midnight. She hugged her backpack to her chest, trying to disappear into the shadows. Each day blended into the next. Kendra wandered between libraries, shelters, and job centers, feeling more invisible with each step. But sometimes, in the quiet moments, when the hunger and cold weren't gnawing at her so fiercely, she would remember the man at the train station. His face, his voice, his eyes. She remembered giving him the last $10 and wondered if it had been foolish. Was she stupid to have given away her last bit of money? She had nothing now, not a dollar to her name, not a place to stay, but in her heart, there was a strange peace, a quiet certainty that maybe, just maybe, she'd done the right thing. One evening, as Kendra sat on the edge of a park bench, trying to dry her socks in the last of the sunlight, a group of teenagers walked by. One of them tossed an empty soda can in her direction and sneered. "Get a job," he muttered, his voice dripping with disdain. Kendra didn't look up. She didn't have the energy to fight anymore. That night, she returned to the library, but the doors were locked. It was a holiday. She wandered the streets until nearly midnight, her shoes soaked, her body cold and weary. She found a bus shelter to rest in, but even there, the fear crept into her chest. That night, for the first time in a long while, she cried. Not loudly, not with sobs, but silently, her tears mingling with the collar of her coat. She missed her mother. She missed feeling safe, loved, known. The empty ache in her stomach seemed small compared to the hollow pain inside her chest. The next day, it was a Tuesday morning when Kendra met Ruth. She sat on her usual bench in the park, her knees drawn to her chest, her coat zipped up against the cold. The ache in her stomach was constant, but it had become a part of her life. She hadn't eaten in nearly 2 days when the old woman approached. Ruth was in her 70s, wearing a wool shawl and carrying a small brown paper bag. She moved with purpose, but when she neared Kendra, she paused. "You look hungry," Ruth said gently. Kendra blinked, unsure if she was being judged or pitied. "I'm fine," she muttered, but Ruth smiled kindly and sat beside her. She opened the paper bag, revealing a sandwich, thick slices of bread, ham, cheese, and mustard. "I bring extra every morning," Ruth explained, "just in case I run into someone who needs it." Kendra hesitated, looking at the sandwich with disbelief. "I can't take that," she whispered. "Why not?" Ruth asked. "Is your pride bigger than your hunger?" Kendra looked away, embarrassed. Ruth waited quietly, patiently, until Kendra finally took the sandwich, her hands trembling. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Ruth nodded. "There's a soup kitchen just a few blocks away, on Monroe Street. They're always short on help. You look like someone who could use a warm place." Kendra felt the warmth of the sandwich in her hands, but it wasn't just the food, it was the kindness. That afternoon, Kendra found the soup kitchen, its faded brick exterior almost hidden behind overgrown bushes. She asked for Carol, as Ruth had told her to, and when Carol appeared, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, she was immediately given a job. The first few hours were a blur. Kendra chopped vegetables, wiped down tables, and served soup. But as she worked, she started to feel something she hadn't felt in a long time: useful. People came in, men and women of all ages, their faces worn by life, but their smiles still intact. There was a sense of resilience in them, a quiet dignity that Kendra recognized. When the shift ended, Carol handed her an envelope with a small stipend. It wasn't much, just $20, but it was enough to buy a bus pass, maybe even get her a few days of stability. More than the money, though, it was the recognition, the trust. Kendra wasn't invisible anymore. A week later, the days seemed to fall into a new rhythm. Kendra returned to the soup kitchen every day, not just for the food, but to help. She chopped vegetables, folded napkins, and learned the names of the regulars. She listened to their stories, stories of loss, but also of resilience. One afternoon, as she was finishing up her shift, Carol came over and handed her a small envelope. "Just a little something extra," Carol said, her eyes kind. "You've earned it." Kendra opened the envelope to find another $20 bill. It wasn't much, but it was enough for a meal and maybe a couple of days' worth of stability. She held it in her hands for a moment, realizing how far she had come in just a few weeks, from hopelessness to being able to help others. That evening, she sat on the curb outside the soup kitchen, watching the sunset paint the sky with hues of orange and pink. It wasn't much, but for the first time in a long while, Kendra felt like she was on her way somewhere, not stuck, not invisible. The next day, as Kendra was heading to the soup kitchen, she was shocked to see a familiar face. A man was standing in front of the door, his tailored coat clearly out of place in this part of town. His shoes were polished, his hair neatly combed, but it was his eyes that stopped Kendra in her tracks. His blue eyes were calm, but there was something undeniably familiar about them. Her heart skipped as she stared at him, recognizing the same look, the same person. The man's lips parted in the faintest smile as their gazes met. He seemed to pause for just a moment, almost like he couldn't believe his own eyes. Then he took a step forward, his voice warm, yet calm, as if there were no rush in the world. "Hello," he said. Kendra blinked, still unsure if she was dreaming or if the man before her was real. She looked at him carefully, trying to place where she had seen him before. "Do I know you?" she asked, her voice low. He tilted his head, a small, knowing smile playing at the edges of his lips. "You do," he said, his tone light, almost amused. "Or at least, you once trusted me when no one else would." It clicked. The train station, the rain, the $10 bill. "You," Kendra whispered, "you're the man from the train station. The one I gave money to." His smile deepened. "Yes, that was me. I was a mess that day, wet, cold, and desperate. You gave me your last $10. And I never forgot you." Kendra felt a rush of disbelief. The scruffy man she had helped was now standing in front of her, looking polished, composed, and entirely different from the man she remembered. "Why are you here?" Kendra asked, still stunned, her heart racing. The man looked around the room, as if he were trying to take in his surroundings. "I was passing through the neighborhood and saw the sign," he said, as if it were the most casual thing in the world. "Something told me I should stop by." Kendra raised an eyebrow. "You just decided to walk into a soup kitchen in this part of town?" He shrugged, a grin tugging at the corners of his lips. "I don't usually do things like this. But when I saw that sign, something inside me, I knew I had to come in." "Do you work here?" Kendra asked, a little confused. He shook his head. "No, I don't work here. I volunteer." "Why?" Kendra asked, her voice quieter now. "Because you helped me when I had nothing," he said, his gaze steady. "I'd like to return the favor." Her eyes searched his face for any sign of insincerity, but she found none. This wasn't the same man she had met at the train station. This was someone different. Someone who had come back into her life not by coincidence, but with purpose. Kendra took a deep breath. "You don't need to repay me," she said, her voice trembling a little. "I just did what anyone else would have done." The man reached into his coat, pulled out a crisp $10 bill, and handed it to her. "I think you'll find that I don't do things the usual way," he said, his tone kind but firm. "This is me repaying you." Kendra stared at the bill in her hand, her heart pounding. "I don't understand," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He smiled again. "I know you didn't give me that money expecting anything in return, but I haven't forgotten what you did for me. And I want to show you that it mattered." Kendra's fingers brushed the $10 bill, the weight of it heavy in her hand. She didn't know how to respond. This stranger had returned from nowhere, offering her something she hadn't expected, and now she was left wondering, what did he really want? "Thank you," she finally said, the words soft and almost hesitant. "But I don't need your money." "I know," he said, looking into her eyes. "But I think you'll let me take you out for coffee sometime. Maybe dinner. Because I haven't forgotten about you." Kendra felt a wave of warmth spread through her chest. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the unexpected kindness, the recognition of what she had done for him when she had nothing left to give. "I don't know what to say," she said, her voice faltering. This is all so overwhelming." The man smiled gently. "Say yes." And in that moment, Kendra realized that life had a funny way of bringing people together when they least expected it. The next few days felt like a blur. Kendra returned to the soup kitchen, where she worked alongside Carol and the other volunteers, trying to keep her mind occupied. But the encounter with the man, the one who had returned to repay her kindness, kept playing over and over in her thoughts. Every time she looked up from her tasks, she half expected him to walk through the door again, looking the same as he had the other day, polished, confident, and out of place in a soup kitchen. But he didn't show up again. She told herself it didn't matter. After all, she had given him $10 because she believed he needed it, not because she expected anything in return. And yet, there was something inside her that wanted to know more, wanted to understand why he had come back and what he wanted from her. A week passed, and life continued, albeit with a sense of quiet anticipation in the air. One afternoon, as Kendra was setting up for lunch service, Carol came up to her with a small smile. "I've got someone here who wants to speak with you," Carol said, her eyes twinkling with curiosity. Kendra froze for a moment, her heart skipping a beat. Could it be him? She followed Carol into the main room, and there, standing by the serving table, was the man. This time not in the same scruffy jacket, but in a tailored coat that looked even more expensive than before. He wasn't just a stranger anymore, he was Khalid Al-Fayed, the man she had once given her last $10 to. He looked even more out of place now, but there was something in his posture, something in the way he stood there, waiting, that gave him an air of calm authority. Kendra's breath caught in her throat. He turned when he heard her footsteps, his eyes meeting hers with the same warmth and sincerity that she remembered. "Hi," he said, his voice soft, almost hesitant, as if he wasn't sure what to expect from her. "Khalid," Kendra said, her voice cracking slightly. She hadn't expected to see him again, let alone like this. "What are you doing here?" He smiled, a small but genuine smile that made her heart flutter. "I came to see you," he replied, his voice steady. "I've been thinking a lot about you and, well, I wanted to make sure you're okay." Kendra felt a mix of emotions, surprise, curiosity, maybe even a little unease. This wasn't the same man she had met at the train station. He wasn't the stranger who had been desperate for help, now he stood before her, someone with a presence that seemed to demand attention. "I'm fine," Kendra said, though it didn't quite feel true. She wasn't fine, not entirely. But something in his eyes, something in his unwavering sincerity, made her feel like she could believe him. Khalid took a step closer, his gaze never leaving hers. "I think you know by now that I owe you more than just money," he said, his tone serious, almost contemplative. "I came here today to offer you something, if you'll accept it." Kendra blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. "What do you mean?" Khalid reached into his coat pocket, pulling out a sleek black business card. He held it out to her, and she took it, turning it over in her hands. "Khalid Al-Fayed," she read aloud, blinking in disbelief. "CEO, Novaspark Technologies." She stared at him, completely dumbfounded. This was the same man who had stood before her in the rain, desperate for $10. And now he was a CEO? She felt a knot tighten in her stomach. "I know this is a lot to take in," Khalid said, his voice calming, "but I wanted you to understand where I'm coming from. I've worked hard for everything I have, but I've never forgotten what it was like to be on the other side, without a safety net, without support. That's why I've spent years working on projects through my foundation. I want to make a difference." Kendra glanced at the business card again, still processing the revelation. "But why me?" she asked softly, still unsure of his intentions. "Why are you offering me anything?" Khalid smiled, almost ruefully. "Because you showed me something that I don't see very often in my world. Kindness, selflessness, a willingness to help someone even when you had nothing to give. You didn't hesitate to trust me, and you didn't expect anything in return. And that, well, that means more to me than any amount of money." Kendra's breath caught in her throat. She didn't know what to say. She had given him her last $10, not because she expected anything, but because she thought it was the right thing to do. To know that he had remembered, that he had been so deeply affected by her kindness, was both humbling and overwhelming. "I want to offer you something in return," Khalid continued, his voice steady and genuine. "I want to help you get back on your feet, Kendra. I know the struggles you've been through. I've seen it, and I believe you have the strength to do more, to help others in the way you helped me." Her heart pounded as his words sank in. "What are you saying?" she asked, almost afraid to believe it. "I want to offer you a chance," he said, stepping closer. "Not just a job, but a purpose. We have positions at my foundation, community outreach programs. I think you'd be perfect. You've already been giving so much, let me help you turn that into something bigger. Something that could change lives, starting with yours." Kendra stared at him, feeling a whirlwind of emotions. She had nothing, no home, no job, no family to fall back on. She had been struggling to survive, just trying to make it through each day. And now here he was, offering her a chance to rebuild, to help others, to make a difference in the world. It felt like a dream. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't even have a stable address. No phone number. I'm still living day to day." Khalid placed a hand on the table in front of him, leaning in slightly. "It's not about your address or your phone number. It's about your heart, your resilience. I've worked with people who have all the degrees and all the resources in the world, but they don't have what you have. You've got the passion to make real change." Kendra looked down at the card in her hand again, her fingers trembling. It felt too good to be true. Was this really happening? Khalid smiled, his eyes full of patience and understanding. "You don't have to decide right now. Take your time, But just know that the door's open. And it's waiting for you. The days that followed felt surreal for Kendra. She spent her time at the soup kitchen, going through the motions of preparing meals and serving guests, but her mind kept returning to the offer Khalid had extended. A part of her wanted to dismiss it. After all, she had been in survival mode for so long, it felt almost impossible to trust anyone, or any situation, that didn't come with strings attached. But then, in quieter moments, when she found herself alone with her thoughts, the weight of Khalid's words settled deeper into her heart. His offer wasn't just a chance at a job, it was an opportunity for something more. It was a chance to rebuild her life, to find purpose, and maybe, just maybe, to help others who were struggling the way she had. But the fear, the doubt, those voices were still there. They whispered that she wasn't good enough, that this was too much for someone like her, someone who didn't even have an address to list on a job application. By the end of the week, Kendra's mind was a battlefield. She had tried to forget about Khalid and his offer, but it clung to her like a shadow. It was like standing at the edge of a cliff, staring down into an abyss, wondering if she would soar or fall. One evening, after another long shift at the kitchen, Kendra found herself sitting on a bench just outside the building, her thoughts swirling. It was a cold night, the kind where your breath comes out in clouds, but Kendra hardly noticed. She had become used to the chill, used to the aching emptiness that filled her chest. "Are you all right?" The voice was familiar, soft, and calm. Kendra looked up, and there he was, Khalid, standing in front of her, his coat buttoned up against the cold. He hadn't told her he was coming, but there he was, like he always knew when she needed him. "I'm fine," she said, giving him a tired smile. Khalid didn't seem convinced. He sat down beside her on the bench, the silence stretching between them for a moment. Kendra didn't say anything, but she didn't need to. There was something about him that made her feel like she could let her guard down, if only for a moment. Finally, he spoke. "You've been quiet," he said gently. "I know you're weighing things in your mind. I just want to remind you that you don't have to make a decision today. But I believe in you, Kendra." She swallowed, her throat tight. "It's not that simple," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't even have a phone. I don't have an address. I'm lost. I don't know how to get back from here." Khalid turned to her, his expression serious. "I know where you're coming from. I've seen it, but let me tell you something. When I was growing up, I didn't have it all either. I was in a place where I didn't know how I was going to make it. But someone reached out to me when I was at my lowest, and that made all the difference." Kendra looked at him, her heart heavy with the weight of his words. "Who?" she asked, curiosity creeping into her voice. "My mother," he said softly. "She believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. And now, I want to do the same for you." Kendra took a deep breath, letting his words sink in. She had been so used to doing everything on her own, so used to feeling like she was invisible, that she couldn't wrap her mind around the idea that someone might actually see her, might actually believe in her. Khalid reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "I know you've been struggling," he said, his voice kind. "And I don't want you to feel alone. Here." He handed her the envelope, and Kendra took it hesitantly, unsure of what it contained. When she opened it, she found a bus ticket and a small card with the address of a nearby apartment complex. "I've arranged a place for you," Khalid said, his eyes soft. "It's not much, but it's yours for as long as you need it. I want you to have a stable place to stay, something you don't have to worry about. You deserve that." Kendra's eyes filled with tears as she looked at the card. It wasn't just a place to stay, it was a lifeline. It was hope. "I don't know what to say," she whispered, her hands trembling. "Why are you doing this for me?" Khalid smiled, his gaze warm and steady. "Because I believe in you, Kendra. I believe you have something special to offer the world. And I want to help you see that." Kendra took a moment to compose herself, wiping the tears from her eyes. She had come so far in the last few weeks, but this was something else. This was more than she had ever expected. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Khalid replied. "Just know that I'm here for you. Whenever you're ready, the foundation is ready for you. But this is a first step. A place where you can breathe and take your time." Kendra nodded slowly, her heart filled with gratitude. She didn't know what the future held, but in that moment, she finally felt like she had a place in it. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she was fighting alone. She stood up, the envelope clutched tightly in her hand. "I'll take it," she said softly. "I'll take that first step." Khalid smiled, standing up as well. "That's all I ask." As Kendra walked away, the weight in her chest had lightened, just a little. There was still uncertainty ahead, but now she had a path to follow. She didn't know where it would lead, but for the first time in a long time, she was ready to find out. The next few days felt like a dream, like Kendra was walking through a world that didn't quite feel real. She moved into the small apartment Khalid had arranged for her, a modest space on the second floor of an old building just a few blocks from the soup kitchen. It wasn't much, but it was clean, quiet, and most importantly, hers. The walls were bare, the furniture sparse, but it was a place where she could rest, a place to start over. For the first time in what felt like forever, Kendra could take a breath without feeling the weight of the world pressing down on her. She no longer had to worry about where she would sleep, where her next meal would come from. She had a roof over her head and a chance to build something she had never thought possible. The first night in the apartment was the strangest. Kendra sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the room. The silence felt unfamiliar, almost overwhelming. She had grown so used to the constant noise of the streets, the bustle of the city, the uncertainty of every moment. Now, in the quiet of her new apartment, she realized just how exhausted she was, not just physically, but emotionally. She sank into the bed, pulling the thin blanket around her shoulders. The apartment was small, but it was hers, and for the first time in months, she allowed herself to rest. The following week, Kendra began working with the foundation. She wasn't sure what to expect, hadn't even known what working with a foundation really meant. But when she walked into the office for the first time, she was surprised to find it wasn't intimidating at all. The space was open and airy, with bright walls, plants in the corners, and a palpable sense of purpose in the air. The team was young and dynamic, each person busy with their own tasks but always taking a moment to check in with one another. It wasn't a corporate office, it was more like a community, a group of people working toward a common goal. Khalid introduced her to the team, but he never treated her like a newcomer. He treated her like a peer, like someone who belonged there. "This is Kendra," he said to the group, his voice warm. "She's going to help us make a real difference." At first, Kendra didn't know where to start. She was unsure of what she had to offer. But Khalid and the team didn't waste any time. They didn't focus on her past, on her struggles. They focused on what she could contribute, what skills she had, what ideas she brought to the table. Kendra worked closely with Maria, a coordinator who had been with the foundation for years. Maria was patient and understanding, always willing to answer questions and provide guidance. They worked on community outreach programs, creating resources for underserved neighborhoods. Kendra learned how to draft proposals, organize events, and even navigate the complex world of fundraising. It felt like a whirlwind at first, but Kendra was learning, and she was contributing in ways she never thought possible. Every day, she felt a little more confident, a little more sure of herself. One evening, after a particularly busy day at the office, Kendra sat down with Khalid in the small break room, sipping her coffee. The room was quiet now, everyone else had gone home for the night, and the only sounds were the hum of the refrigerator and the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. Khalid looked over at her, a slight smile on his face. "How's it going?" he asked. Kendra shrugged, a bit overwhelmed. "It's going faster than I thought it would." She took a sip of her coffee. "I never imagined I'd be doing this. I never thought I'd be in a place where I could actually help others, you know?" Khalid nodded. "I understand. You've come a long way, Kendra." Kendra looked down at her mug, her fingers tracing the rim. "I still don't feel like I've earned it. I don't feel like I'm ready for all this." Khalid leaned forward, his expression serious. "You don't have to feel ready. You just have to show up. Every day, you show up, and you'll be amazed at how far you can go. We all have doubts. I still have doubts sometimes. But the important thing is that we keep moving forward." Kendra nodded slowly, his words sinking in. She had spent so much time doubting herself, feeling unworthy of any help or success. But maybe, just maybe, Khalid was right. Maybe it wasn't about feeling ready. It was about taking one step at a time, moving forward, no matter how unsure she felt. "I'm starting to see that," Kendra said quietly, her voice full of reflection. "And maybe that's all I need to do. Keep moving forward." Khalid smiled, his eyes soft with encouragement. "Exactly, and I'll be here, every step of the way." Kendra felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. She wasn't in this alone anymore. She had a purpose now, a place where she belonged, and people who believed in her. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. The days passed in a blur of meetings, programs, and new experiences. Kendra found herself growing more confident, more certain of her place in the foundation. She was involved in community projects, helping organize fundraisers, and creating initiatives that reached out to those in need. And then, one day, Khalid called her into his office. "Sit down," he said, his voice serious but warm. "I want to show you something." He handed her a folder, and Kendra opened it to find a detailed proposal for a new program. One that she had helped shape, one that could make a real difference in the lives of those struggling in their community. "This is your project," Khalid said, his voice full of pride. "We want you to take the lead on it." Kendra stared at the proposal, a lump forming in her throat. She had come so far, from the woman at the train station with nothing to her name, to this moment. And now, she was going to lead a project that could change lives. "I don't even know what to say," she whispered, overwhelmed. Khalid smiled. "Just say yes." And in that moment, Kendra realized how much she had changed. She wasn't the same woman who had given away her last $10 at the train station. She had found her purpose, and now, she was ready to help others in ways she never thought possible. Kendra's first day leading the new project felt like a dream, like she had stepped into a role she never expected but one that somehow felt right. The project was called Hope on Wheels, a mobile service that would take hot meals, medical supplies, and job assistance to the most neglected areas of the city. The idea had come to her after a long shift at the soup kitchen when she had thought about the people who couldn't get to shelters, those who didn't have the means or the stability to seek help. The foundation loved the idea. Khalid and the rest of the team had been incredibly supportive, but now, it was Kendra's turn to prove that she could make it happen. She sat in the small office, flipping through the notes she had taken, the proposal she had worked so hard on. She felt the pressure of the responsibility, the weight of expectations, but she also felt something else, determination, the spark of hope that had once been buried under a mountain of doubts. Today was the first day that the Hope on Wheels van would be operational. She had spent weeks planning, securing permits, organizing volunteers, and building a network of resources. The van, a large, bright blue vehicle with Hope on Wheels, written in bold, cheerful letters, was parked outside the foundation's building. It was a symbol of everything she had fought for. Khalid had come by earlier that morning to wish her luck. He was quiet, watching from the sidelines, as he often did. But there was no denying the pride in his eyes as he gave her the keys to the van. "You've got this," he'd said, his voice warm with belief. And now, with the van parked and ready to roll, Kendra felt a surge of excitement. This was her moment, the one she had worked so hard for. She wasn't just leading a project, she was creating something that could make a real difference, something that had the potential to change lives. The first stop was a park on the outskirts of the city, a place Kendra knew all too well. The cracked benches and graffiti-covered statues were a stark reminder of how far she had come. This was where she had spent nights shivering, hiding from the cold, and dreaming of something better. Now, she was driving a van that would bring food, warmth, and hope to the very people she had once been. The volunteers quickly set up a small area with folding tables and chairs, and Kendra stood by, directing them, feeling the rush of responsibility, but also a quiet sense of pride. Soon, the first people began to arrive, people who had clearly seen better days. They looked weary, weathered by life, but they moved toward the tables with an unspoken sense of trust, of quiet hope. Kendra walked over to one of the men, an older man with a tired face, and handed him a steaming bowl of soup. "Thank you," he said, his voice raspy but filled with gratitude. "This means more than you know." Kendra smiled, a lump forming in her throat. She hadn't expected it to be this emotional. She had seen the struggle before, had lived it herself, but now, standing here in this moment, offering help to those who needed it most, it felt different. "Just remember," she said softly, "you're not invisible. You matter." The man nodded, his eyes lighting up as if her words had truly meant something. Kendra moved down the line, serving food, making small talk with the others. Every interaction, every smile, every thank you felt like a small victory, a reminder that she was doing the right thing. By the end of the day, the van had served hundreds of meals. There were a few tired faces among the volunteers, but there was also a sense of accomplishment in the air. As Kendra walked back to the van to gather some supplies, she saw Khalid standing in the distance, watching quietly. She smiled at him, and he smiled back, his gaze filled with pride. "You did it," he said when she approached. "You really did it." Kendra's heart swelled. It wasn't just about the success of the day. It was about everything she had overcome to get here. The struggles, the doubts, the fears, all of it had led her to this moment, and she couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for everything that had brought her here. "I couldn't have done it without you," Kendra said, her voice sincere. You believed in me when no one else did, when I didn't even believe in myself. Khalid chuckled softly, shaking his head. You always had it in you. I just gave you the push. Kendra took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything she had achieved and everything she had yet to accomplish. She wasn't just rebuilding her life. She was building something bigger than herself. A program that could help others in the way she had been helped. That evening, as she sat on the steps of the Foundation's office building, the sky painted in shades of orange and purple, Kendra took a moment to reflect on everything she had experienced over the past year. She had gone from being homeless and hopeless to leading a project that was making a real difference in the community. And it wasn't just about the work, it was about the people. The ones she helped, and the ones who had helped her. Kendra's phone buzzed in her pocket, and she pulled it out to see a message from Khalid. Proud of you. You've done something amazing today. Let's keep building. Together. Kendra smiled, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. She had found her place, her purpose, and the person she had always been meant to become. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living.